Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Who here has gone about mourning, the process of grieving, the wrong way? Jeff says there is no wrong way. Josh says that's not true. I will volunteer that when my dad's mom died, I was in rabbinical school. I went out to rural Virginia where she and my dad's dad lived. And I remember the day of her funeral afterward, I wound up saying Mourner's Kaddish. But I didn't say it with a minyan. I did it wrong. Rabbinical school is great for knowing all of the things you do wrong in Judaism. And she wasn't even Jewish, so I don't know whether or not I should have been saying for her whatever. I'm just putting it out there. I said Mourner's Kaddish, though, and I recognize that that was not traditionally the way in which one is supposed to do that. If there is a right and wrong way, if we go with the Jeff school here, I was doing, and I would suggest using and adapting a tool of Judaism, a mechanism that we have for mourning, to my own circumstances. The Josh school, perhaps, might feel otherwise, that, maybe there actually are some rules about who is supposed to say what and when in what order, actually. It's not a free-for-all, necessarily. Josh, you want to add to your school?
Well, no, I meant wrong way, like, I know people turn to violence.
Right.
That kind of thing. That's what I mean, like, subtle interpretations of God.
Okay.
I meant, like, truly wrong.
So forgive me for being unfair to the Josh school. The Josh was talking about, actually...
That meant mine.
Oh, and I was unfair to Jeff, too. That's good. Let's stick around. Let's see who else I can be unfair to here. But when Josh talks about being afflicted or afflicting violence, certain kinds of sadness and grieving upon other people, Torah actually talks about that in points, that you're not supposed to cut yourself, supposed to gash into your own flesh, these marks into your own skin. It specifies that that's not a thing that you do. In fact, Kriya, there are those who have theorized that Kriya was actually a substitute for that at a certain point in time in which that was an extant practice, cutting yourself in grieving. And the idea that, no, actually, well, maybe let's do that to the suit jacket or something instead, or to the ribbon. But that, yes, there are halachic peculiarities to how it is that one is supposed to mourn. And then even Torah says, forgetting all of the legalese around it, there is stuff you could do that would be unhealthy around mourning and sadness. Point well taken, Josh. I'm coming around because I'm kicking around in my head. It was a Jewish observance. I'm reluctant to call it a holiday. A Jewish observance on Monday of this week. Anybody remember what was Monday? Yes, David.
The tentative stuff, fast day.
Asara B'Tevet.
I hope, because that's when we read Torah.
The communal fast day begins Tuesday at dawn. It's that day that begins Monday night when it started. But the fast, because it's only a partial fast, would have begun in the morning. Thank you both. I was looking at the Asara B'Tevet entry in the little manual of dates, the Luach that the movement puts out that says this is when this is supposed to happen and these are your concrete instructions and whatever. And I found something I'd never seen before around Asara B'Tevet. Following the suggestion of the chief rabbinate in Israel, some observe Asara B'Tevet as Holocaust Memorial Day, adding special prayers for the Shoah. And then there is an additional innovation that the chief rabbinate of Israel brought to Asara B'Tevet, designating it as Yom HaKadish HaKlali, a general Kaddish day. Is anybody outside of Rabbi here who is nodding along know what a general Kaddish day is? Yeah, David.
Wouldn't that be like a day where you just say Kaddish for everyone, regardless if you're in a period of mourning or yard site or anything like that?
Yes, and I will add to it, one would say Kaddish for those for whom their yard sites are unknown. If we do not know when they actually died, this sort of general Kaddish day becomes a device that takes them in that sense.
And
Yes, Josh.
I know there are some yurt sites in our list that are from Holocaust, people who died in the Shoah, who their family picked a date that was possibly, within the time frame that they know they died, and decided to pick a day and make that day or so.
So to Josh's point, and I'm glad you took us there are people who will mark other yard sites and deaths at times that they may not have been positive of, but they're pretty sure it happened around that ballpark or sometime. Or even if they're not sure, they may have simply picked a time to designate to have something concrete in that sense to hold on to. So Josh, you're right about that. And are those people wrong for having done so? Everyone's shaking their heads no. I don't think so either.
Certainly nothing destructive about it.
No, nothing. It's not hurting anybody, certainly, to do that. So why would it be wrong? Yeah, go ahead,
There are
Josh.
people who know full well that the yurt site's on Wednesdays, but they decide to come on Shabbat.
Okay, and then there is this that we have seen that is a different convention, let me say, of knowing that one has a loved one's yard site coming up that week. You're not going to make it to morning minyan that day or whatever it is. You're going to go the Shabbat before or the Shabbat after sometimes. It depends on whose custom it is. But it's this idea of carving out a time to do it, even if it's not the exact right time. But let's make it work. That's a convention too. That's real. That's a thing. I was so struck by this idea of making, and for those of you who are keeping score, what is Asara B'Tevet? What's the point? I wanted to give other people a chance too, David, but it looks like David knows. Go ahead.
I believe that this was the date of the siege against Jerusalem, is one of the dates there. And I believe also, I think the Talmud also, I think, knows that this is also the day that the rabbis were locked up to start doing the Septuagint.
So we're going to stick with your first answer in particular. There is some Talmudic back and forth about that, but the traditional answer, as David points out, is it was the beginning of the siege of Jerusalem in 587 BCE, so negative numbers on the number line, by Nebuchadnezzar of Bavel, and it ends 18 months later with the destruction of Bayit Rishon, of the first temple, the Temple of Solomon. Okay? So this is marking just the beginning of the siege. We've got another 18 months to go. And I'm looking at my luach here. How did they get around to putting Holocaust Memorial on the day marking the beginning of the siege of the first temple? What's that?
I didn't quite catch the question.
How is it that the chief rabbinate of Israel got around to tacking on Holocaust Memorial on Asara B'Tevet, which is the day that we remember the beginning of the siege, which was going to culminate in the destruction of Bayit Rishon back in 586 BCE? Yeah, go ahead, Howard. You know this one?
I think maybe it's because there were so many deaths at different places. So this was the beginning of it. Because like Bobby Yor was one time, the death of everybody in Krachenborough was another day, and a different Stadtlach, they assassinated people at different times.
Okay, so
Well, that was such a big destruction.
Yes.
That they started the original, one of the big destructions of our people.
yeah.
Maybe that is the connector.
So maybe it has to do with a big destruction of our people, the fact that it's a range of dates that all of these different destructions of both individual communities as well as people took place. Rabbi?
Can you define what Stadtlach means?
Stadtlach, can you define the term in the Yiddish?
For the little towns in which so many of our people live.
Those little towns in Yiddish, thank you. Okay, well, the plural of shtetl, sure. So I went down the rabbit hole with this a little bit, and I was surprised at what I found, which was, because what about Yom HaShoah, right? Why might we not be marking this on Yom HaShoah instead? Why would we go and superimpose some of this sacred memory on Asara B'Tevet?
Well, if it's stored up by the chief rabbis, they wanted to connect something to modern Israel with this. It was
Lahavdil. Josh said, well, are we just trying to combine, contemporary Israel with these traditional holidays? And I said, lahavdil. On the contrary, my friend. There was actually, and I don't know that I never thought about this before, a great deal of discomfort with the timing of Yom HaShoah. Why? Because it falls in Nisan. And so there are a lot of traditional Jews who would not mark a big Memorial Day at that time. And this almost became a supplementary day of mourning if you weren't going to mourn in Nisan around a time that had a traditional prohibition. And so I go back to that first question. Is there a right or a wrong way of mourning? I'm not sure that those rabbis who reject Yom HaShoah, not out of any antipathy toward the Jewish people or Jewish memory or Jewish losses in the Shoah, but they do so out of a consciousness about their joyousness needing to happen in Nisan and all of that, and so they find another day to do it. And, well, who here has ever been really, really torn up about the destruction of Bayit Rishon specifically? I'll wait. It's an interesting thing. In the same way that I adapted the mourner's Kaddish for my grandmother who wasn't Jewish in a place that didn't have a minyan, here we are going through all of this mourning ritual for a thing that I'm not sure anybody is... How broken up are we about the destruction of Bayit Rishon, specifically Rishon, not even Sheni, not even the second temple, but the first temple in particular? What an interesting thing to take Jewish memory and to sort of recombine it and fold it together with this sense of the Shoah. And so in that way, Josh is kind of right. They do kind of take something very ancient and they blend it together with modern Israel and modern Jewish people in that way. But it gets to a bigger question to me of, is there a right and wrong way around mourning? I've heard it said that if Judaism is very good at anything, there's a lot of stuff we're not good at. But if there's something that we're really good at, it's actually death. Paul is nodding along. She's heard this one before.
Yeah.
That the rituals, the motions, the concentric circles that we build around it to care for people who are in need are a powerful toolkit, so to speak. And even with the structure that we have from all of that, is it watertight? Is it perfect? No, and so we keep tangling and tweaking and playing with it, and we wind up thinking about Bayit Rishon somewhere in the middle of Shtetlach and Babi Yar and some of these other things. Because even if we are pretty good at it as Jews, we're not perfect at it. And we recognize that there is a certain kind of holiness within that, bringing ourselves to a place of mourning and to remembering and sacred memory in that sense. If you're of the Jeff school of thought, that was a long meandering way to get to the Jeff school of maybe there's not actually a right or wrong way. I am grateful for all of the pieces that we do inherit. Maybe there are extreme cases, and perhaps we don't want to pull some of the threads of, as therapists might refer to it, as complex grief. But thinking about the ways in which we take our toolkit, and that of the Rabbanim and sages of the generations gone by, and adapt it and plug it into our world and make it swim and work with us and make it work for my grandmother in Huddleston, Virginia, and make it work for a bunch of Datiim in Israel with a Yom HaShoah that falls in Nisan. We're all kind of part of this project together, figuring out how it is that we take and we hold and we give life to Jewish tradition in our own world. It's not simple. It's not always pretty, and it doesn't always make clean sense, but it is a holy project. Shabbat Shalom.